Some of the things that work well for drums are compression, a bit of EQ sometimes, and distortion or some sort of overdrive can actually really help your drums. Rob's asking, what is the best app for getting better drum sounds after you've laid down your tracks in GB? So, better drum sounds. I mean, it depends on what you want to use. So there's a few options, and in fact, what we'll do, we'll bring up my iPad because I need to bring this up so that we can have some things on display here. So if we bring up my screen with drums, so for instance, here are the drums for New Beginning. Now these are Jade Star's drums. They're all just on one track here. You can separate out drums, and that's something I've shown in other ones. So that's probably tip number one, is if you want to have control over each individual drum, separate out the drums to different tracks. But if you've got all your drums in one track like this, can we hear that coming through? Yep. That's cool. So if you've got all your drums there, some of the things that work well for drums are compression, a bit of EQ sometimes, and distortion or some sort of overdrive can actually really help your drums. So they're probably the few tips that I'll put in here. And whether you're using drums or drummer or beat sequencer or whatever, you can kind of use these tips with any of those. So if we came in here to plugins and EQ, you can see at the moment we've just got some compression on these drums. So just some straight compression. So if we were finding these drums weren't hitting hard enough, let's just come in here to the middle. What we can do is increase our compression ratio and bring this down. And can you hear that your kick drum and your snare's splashier, your kick drum's got more power because you're compressing it. And what compression is doing is it's actually reducing the peaks. What it does is it pulls up the volume of those softer parts and then just compresses the top. So you're getting more of a blocky waveform there as opposed to having the dynamics between. So it can work well for drums because with drums, you usually want them to be a little bit more consistent. So if we bring these drums back into the mix here, I'll play it without the compression. So if we turn the compression back down to where it was before, drop the ratio back like that, and we play it. There's those drums. Now let's bring up the compression here, and as I bring it up, you'll hear that the drums will really start cutting through the mix. Don't know what I did with the vocals in this one, but yeah, so that's one of the things. The other thing is that I've used, and thanks to Gary Hubbs for this, he's recommended this, and it works really well if you're just using it on your snare drum as opposed to the overall drums, but is to use a little bit of distortion. So if we came in here and we added, and we went to effects and distortion, you can add just a little bit of distortion to this. So this drive knob, I would start with it down, but then as we play these, listen to what happens to the drums as we start. We'll just drop the compression a bit as we start driving this up. And what I'll normally do is I'll put the compression tone up a little bit around about that 3K, because where it's down here, you'll notice it's got kind of that sort of flattened compression sound. Don't really like that. And obviously, if you bring that compression up or the distortion up too much, then you get kind of that bit crusher sound, but a little bit of distortion. And it's the same on your vocals, and that's a tip for what we might be talking about in our tip of the week this week, but on vocals as well. Just dirtying them up, rubbing them in the dirt a little bit. And the one final thing I'll say is that there's a free plugin called Rough Rider 3 that actually does compression, and it gives you a little bit of a dirtier kind of compression sound. So I've got complete videos on Rough Rider 3, but it's another way to get some good compression on your drums. So once you've programmed in your drums, if they're sounding a bit wussy, if they're sounding a little bit buried in the mix, and I didn't even cover EQ. You can also use some EQ on there. So compression, distortion, EQ are kind of the three bits of secret sauce. And again, a lot of those tips came directly from Gary Hubbs, who does some amazing work on drums. And again, thank you to Jade, who does the drumming on pretty much every one of my tracks these days. There are other drummer apps, so Jade Star's covered a lot of the other drummer apps, like X Drummer, and you've got Drummer GOG, you got what's the one she uses, EG Pulse for drums. So there's a bunch of other options that you have there if you want to.